Hello, good evening, my ghouls and goblins. This is Miss Red, and welcome to Insomiac. I am your host, as I said, Miss Red. And what we do here is we talk about the weird, creepy, and strange things in our history and in our present and possibly in our future. So, sit back and enjoy. And just so you know, the makeup is a special treat for everyone. I do have a little bit of props going on tonight, and so I figured I'd complete the look with some scary ghost ghoul makeup. Oh, yes. So a little bit about me. Right here, right now, this wonderful contraption all over my head is called an EEG machine. And actually, some of the things that we're going to talk about in our particular show today were the first steps in making it happen. But needless to say, it was a lot of trial and error to get right where we are. So, yes. So, a little bit of back history here. World War II was the real turning point for a lot of things as far as medicine and scientific research goes. The Nazis, we have to give them a whole lot of credit for a lot of things. They were creepy, weird, and gross people, but they also gave us a whole lot of inventions that we just would not be able to do without today. So, yes. In December 9th, 1946, an American tribunal opened criminal proceedings against 23 German physicians, and administrators that had willingly participated in what was listed as war crimes and crimes against humanity. Out of this, we got what is called the Nuremberg Code that was established in 1948. That basically states to us the voluntary consent of human subjects is absolutely essential in order to do medicine or any sort of scientific things on humans. And the benefits have to outweigh the risk. So, but before that and after that, we still see a lot of times in history where even our governments did not listen to the Nuremberg rule. So, yes. Unfortunately for you animal lovers, there are still tons and tons of countries out there that have absolutely no laws as far as animal testing and animal cruelty goes. So yes, some of these creepy and gross things, I'm warning you now, will involve animals. We go to our first candidate here. Prison inmates. So we start at the top of the list. Unfortunately, prison inmates have been tested on since, well, we formed prisons. So slaves and inmates have always been tested on. And they have been used as test subjects until the 90s. So it wasn't until the 1990s that the first world countries started saying, hey, let's not do testing on our inmates anymore. And yeah, they did all sorts of crazy experiments, anything from injecting them with different medicines and experimental vaccinations to cosmetics to shock therapy, which helped create this thing right here, this magical thing that reads brain waves so they can tell if you have seizures or not. Yeah, because of course the undead queen does happen to have a few screws loose. So, but yes, they did removal of organs. They injected them with household chemicals. They dismembered them. They sodomized them with different things to see what the effect would be on that particular end of things. Electrocution, lobotomy, gender reassignment, cosmetic and pharmaceutical testing, and much more. So, yes. While some people may not necessarily have any sort of empathy for our inmates across the globe, have to admit, it takes a pretty messed up psyche to be like, okay, let's take this human being and completely make them not human anymore, pretty much through testing, use them as a lab rat against their will. So, number 2, Henrietta Lacks. Anybody hear of her? Yes, another almost half undead creature in herself. Henrietta Lacks in 1955. She was the unwilling donor of cells called the immortal human cells. Hers were instrumental in creating the polio vaccine, and actually a lot of vaccines after that. Her particular cells went on to help her family members afterwards, her descendants, be able to cure AIDS, even though they didn't get any of the rights and royalties to it, which is the really messed up thing here. If you're going to take a dead girl's cells, at least give her family the proceeds. Am I right? Am I right? Seriously. Somebody hacked me up and they made a multi-billion-dollar invention that saved billions and billions of lives after that. I would love to see my family paid. Just saying. But unfortunately, yeah, Henrietta, unfortunately, was put into an unmarked pauper's grave as her payment for her cells being stolen from her body in order to make this happen. But we all need to give her thanks, because I don't think any of us would be alive in here in order to be enjoying this show right now. So yeah, for Henrietta, may she rest in peace, and thank you so much for your contributions. Next creepy critter on the list we have is William Harvey in 1598. So he had this crazy, creepy theory. It was called the blood flow theory. Ooh, blood. Tasty. So he was a royal physician of King James I. You know him? Know him? Wrote the modern Bible, modern Holy Bible. That most of the modern versions of the Bible are based off of. Yeah, this guy worked for him. His top physician, right? So he believed that blood was made by the liver through our food, which is, no, not right. Not right. Anybody know what blood is made by? Anybody? Our bones, correct. Ding, ding, ding. Yes, our bones. That's what makes our white and red blood cells, is our bones. Thank you. So, but liver does filter out toxins, so he had it half right. He did figure that it was a filtration system as well. But yeah, he, like I said, animal lovers beware. This guy hacked up animals and everything and constricted their arteries while they were alive as public demonstrations of his theories. Okay? Okay? And then he moved on to willing human participants. Now, understand that willing meant that he usually found really, really poor people and paid them a couple of shillings and didn't tell them what he was going to do to them beforehand. So willing, that's a little speculatory. I mean, I guess that depends if you believe that withholding the truth is not a lie. So, but yes, he wrote a book on all of his wonderful, crazy theories. The Galen theory is what this has been called, and of course the blood flow theory. And so that was publicized in 1628, and that particular book is banned in a lot of medical colleges in the Western world because it's freaking crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, I've seen some really crazy, warped things in my existence, but yes, this book is a weird one. So if you really want to get creeped out and freaked out, it's a good book to read. It's called the De Motu Cordis, or the Motion of the Heart. So, yeah. Now, almost everybody in the Western Hemisphere has heard of this guy. Well, this guy, like many scientists, as you're going to find out, did a lot of stupid things to pretty much prove a lot of his theories. And one of the craziest ones that this guy did, I'm about to tell you about. But who's the guy? It's Sir Isaac Newton. And what did he do? Well, it's from 1665 to 1666. He had a fascination with light. And so he took prisms and put them on his windowsill. And he observed that light refracts this, that, and all that wonderful stuff, right? Now we understand about eyes and how we see how colors happen in a beam of light, which has helped with lasers and all sorts of wonderful technology, right? Well, the other thing he was curious about is how our eyes happen to function to be able to even see that light in the first place. So what was his grand scheme in proving how this works? He took a needle and shoved it back behind his eye. Yes, behind the eye. Okay? Yeah. Now, with that, he did prove his theory that we must have something in the back of our eye that makes us see these colors, which we do. There are little things in the back of our eye that fire off, which enable us to identify color. Okay? And so he did prove that in a certain rudimentary form. But he also went blind for almost a week because of this. Another time, he decided that he was going to stare at the sun for a few days and see what happened from overexposure with light in the eyes. And again, he went blind for another 3 days. So, yes, Isaac Newton, one of the most brilliant men, one of the most known men in Western culture, and as far as physics and science, and he's definitely that borderline between genius and insanity. Am I right? Am I right? Yes, he is. Another lovely scientist that liked to do crazy things. Unfortunately, her crazy things were primarily out of ignorance. And this one we may know as Marie Curie. So Marie Curie was a brilliant young woman, and she was born at a time that women weren't really allowed to take credit for their own work. It just didn't work that way. So, okay, 1898 rolls around. Her and her hubby, okay, she went to college, and her hubby was actually a professor at the college. So they lived on the campus, and they were able to get the college to allocate them some funds so that they could have their own little laboratory shed to perform experiments in. So, yeah, her hubby, Pierre Curie, they met in Paris. I wouldn't say that their marriage was highly passionate or romantic, but they were definitely intellectuals with the same types of goals, and they could get along real well. And Pierre was just stunned by her brilliance, so he was all on board with it. But yeah, so they built their little tool shed, their little secret tool shed lab thing on the campus. Okay. And I'm sorry, Pierre's brother was an engineer. Okay. He was a very brilliant engineer. He also liked to do a lot of carpentry work. Okay. So between the three of them, they designed and built the electrometer. Now, what's the electrometer? It's a thing that helps you basically tell you the strength of an electrical current. Okay. So, yeah, cute little thing. I have one of my own. It's got little red and black toroids. You stick it on the conductors and see exactly how much juice can run through it or is running through it. Brilliant little machine. So these three invented this thing together. Okay. And they also started looking at these different rocks and minerals. Okay. There were these different rocks and minerals that were starting to be refined and mined as almost an after effect of other different things like precious metals and things. They were found in the same area. And they started to have a fascination in the scientific world because they would glow or they would radiate energy. And people didn't really know a whole lot about them, such as thorium and radium. So, Pierre and Marie, they want to know all the properties that radium and thorium would have. and what they could do with it. So they worked all the time and any time they could in this little shed. And the thing is that they would be doing some sort of study thing, and Marie especially, she was always forever in the shed, right? Being the badass woman that she was hell-bent and determined to find out exactly what this stuff did. And she would carry these things around in her pockets. You know, she'd go to lunch, she'd go run her errands, and she'd carry some of this stuff in her pockets, never knowing the truth that we know today, that this stuff is lethal and causes cancer and causes erosion of the flesh and all sorts of things. So, unfortunately, she ended up passing away. They were able to figure out that what was happening was radiation, and they actually named it radiation. That's also where the name radium comes from, is that it was radiating molecules out. But yeah. She died from radiation poisoning, obviously, because of all the crap that she was putting her hands on willy-nilly all the time. She did end up winning 2 Nobel Prizes, though, in 1903 at the World's Fair, in 1911. So yes, it was nice for her to be able to see her work actually get Nobel Prizes for him, because, yeah, she died. Radiation poisoning, leukemia, 1934. Ivan Pavlov. Everybody knows about the bell and the dog and the salivation thing, right? Well, here's the thing. The version that we know is completely incorrect, and the real version is way, way creepier. Okay? So, 1880s to 1900s, there was this dude, Ivan Pavlov, right? He was a Russian physiologist. Okay? Russia, yes. You didn't guess from the name of Pavlov. So, yes, he used dogs as test subjects and everything, of course. And so, yep, the truth is way more gruesome. He cut the head off of one dog and hooked it to a blood dialysis machine to see how long it would stay reflexively responsive. So yeah, he did. Yeah, that was Pavlov. That was one of the things that he did. Yeah, he was kind of having a moment of, oh yeah, because another scientist that we're going to talk about a little bit later did similar things, and Pavlov just wanted to see if his theories were actually correct or not. And since he had the dogs and he didn't know what to do with them, you know, this was his way of exterminating them after he did what we're about to talk about. Yes, the famous salivation experiment was actually performed by taking 7 dogs, strapping them into a feeding station, okay? Like they strapped them in almost like cattle, okay? Okay, and then performing a series of different stimuli on the dogs, one presented with meat. So it could be bells, it could be buzzers, it could be, and quite often it was a buzzer. So what would happen is the dogs would be strapped in, right? And Pavlov actually took and he put a tube down each of the dogs' throats. Yeah, each of their throats and into their and out their stomach, right before their stomachs and everything, that it emptied into a bucket. Okay? And so whenever these buzzers would go off and his assistants would come in with meat to serve to the dogs would salivate and fill the bucket. Well, after a while, anytime the buzzer rang, the dogs salivated and filled the bucket. So, yeah. So this experiment was very, very gross and creepy. Nobody's 150% sure exactly why he chose this particular method, but it did teach us a lot about physiology and how it relates to psychology, and psychology being things like PTSD and how to try to habitually get somebody from not experiencing bad bouts of PTSD. So it proved the brain could be trained, okay, even for responses. Pig bladder limbs. So this is actually a modern one. This is a modern day horror. Okay. So 2000s to present. Scientists utilized the recent Middle Eastern conflict, which left many veterans lacking appendages. Yeah. To try and find a way to stimulate human body to grow new body parts. You know, you go into war, you lose a limb, it's a devastating thing. It pretty much destroys your life. So, these wonderful creatures out here that we call scientists decided to take pig bladder, because when pig bladder is dried into a powder, it's called extracellular matrix. Okay? And it's been used to regrow fingers and eat and regenerate muscle tissue in an injured Iraqi war veteran. So, yes, the Iraqis were definitely the first ones to try this out. How the heck they figured out that pig bladder would turn into an extracellular matrix that would help things be regrown, I have no idea. But they did it, and it's there, and it's done did. And we have a lot of these types of experiments, humans being grown in the belly of pigs, in the uterus of pigs, this, that, and the other. There's all sorts of types of experiments. Human ears being grown on the side of mice. These types of experiments are still extremely common nowadays. And so if you want to get freaked out, just look up modern day animal experiments. Another modern freak out, RFID implants. What the heck is that, right? So that is a thing that's been happening since the 90s. Okay. It's a radio frequency ID device. That's what RFID stands for. Radio frequency ID device. Okay. The chips. They've been put into pets since the late 90s. Now they're wanting to put them into you. Okay. And, yeah, what these chips are supposed to be designed for, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard about them because of everything that's going on as far as the vaccine controversy and all that, and, oh, they're putting chips, mini chips into the vaccine. Here's the scoop, though, kids. They don't have to get you to put a vaccine into your body to put a chip into your body. And I know that here's the thing that's really, really freaky. Everybody's freaking out about RFID implants. Something else that's been being done since the 90s is you're being monitored every day, all day, by some device you voluntarily put in your pocket. And it does all of the things. Tells prisoners or prisons, hospitals, companies, all that stuff where your location is. It can tell them your medical history. It can grant or deny access to documents. It can grant or deny access to buildings. It can tell them your identification, your social security number, pretty much anything that you have willingly put through the internet, through your cellular device, is now property of your government. Don't believe me? Look it up. So, as far as RFID implants, many prisons in the United States are actually already using this so that they can track people, so that we can reduce the amount of serial killers and serial rapists that are in the country. So, yeah. And as far as actually, and they're also using it for dangerous immigrants, people that have been in the United States jail system more than once for rape and torture, and they keep booting them out of the United States back to their home country, and they keep coming back. They chip them now, like pets. So they can be like, oh, ding, ding, ding. This jerk does not belong here. He needs to stop, he or she, they need to stop taking our resources, right? So, yes. Unit 731. Anybody hear of Unit 731? How about Pearl Harbor in Japan in World War II? Well, from about World War II to the 1990s, Japanese universities and medical schools were allowed to use prisoners of war and Asian civilians as guinea pigs to develop killer diseases like anthrax, cholera, the plague, and other pathogens. Yeah. I know that this is something that has come out in the last couple of years, and people didn't realize that, a lot of the pathogens and stuff that we know of today, to a certain degree, have been amplified and made worse by our different government sanctions. Almost every first world country on the planet has their hands in the pocket of a scientific lab. Okay? It's a proven thing. They have to let you know about some of them. They don't have to let you know about all of them, but they have to let you know about some of them. Well, here's the thing. How do you know a pathogen is going to work on humans unless you test it on humans? Yeah. And which humans are you going to test it on? I don't know. Again, going back to that inmates and prisoners testing. Prisoners of war, well, let's just say humanity has done worse with their prisoners of war than that, although some of these things like anthrax and cholera and the plague and not treating it, syphilis, and letting it go into horrible disease, writhing pain for the people. What do you think? Tell me what you think about that. Would it be worse to be a prisoner of war and, say, be tortured and slaughtered in medieval Europe or by the Aztecs and the Incans? Or would it be worse to be in one of these internment camps and be pumped full of pathogens and then forced to work and walk all over the damn place while you're rotting to death inside? I don't know. I'm not sure which one would be worse. The next two, okay, these two we're going to do together because they did the same dumb thing at 2 different times in the same laboratory, one after the other. One was the initial dummy scientist, and the next one was the predecessor and did almost the same exact thing. Okay, so yes, we got Harry Dockley in December 15th of 1945. Okay, so he was working with bombs and trying to figure out how to make nuclear bombs really work good, right? And so he had a bomb with the 2 halves, because if you put the halves together, what happens? Boom. Boom happens, right? Nuclear meltdown. So 2 halves with the plutonium on the inside, you put the halves together across, it creates just the friction pressure, and boom, flutes out. Well, see, Harry Dockley had this wonderfully creative way, okay, of keeping the 2 halves pulled apart. Okay? Yeah. He decided he decided that he was gonna put a brick inside of it, right? In between the 2 halves. Unfortunately, that didn't work very well, as you'll see next. But before that even happened, they were trying to get the plutonium into the place, into the actual lab, right? So they had it in this big box, the big reinforced box and stuff, and they had it in the back of, I'm assuming, like an SUV type vehicle or something. Well, they were going to put it in the lab, and Harry dropped it. So, of course, that made a core meltdown right there. And unfortunately, him and his assistants that were helping him out, they both died of radiation poisoning really, really shortly. Well, apparently somebody got this thing into the lab. This guy, of course, died. And just like that, the government turned around and hired his replacement. And his replacement was Louis Slotin. Okay? Louis Slotin, May 30th, 1946. That's when he died. He died because he thought it would be a great idea. He got it all assembled and everything, got the plutonium in there and had the 2 halves. He took a, what was it? It was like a mixing stick, like a painter's mixing stick or something like that, or a knife or some shit like that. And that's how he was propping it up to keep the 2 halves from closing together. Because there was an actual safety encasement that was supposed to be the thing that you used to pull it apart and then settle it back together without actually making it collapse and go off, right? But apparently the safety encasement took way too much time. People wonder why we have OSHA. Okay. And so, yeah, he just shoved, a painter's mixing trowel in there. And he did this quite a few times and everything until one day the painter's trowel slipped. And yeah, kaboom. Radiation poisoning galore. Melting flesh, wonderful bad news bears. So that's that. And the last guy that we're going to talk about, 1940s. I promised you I'd tell you who was the inspiration for Pavlov to have done the experiment with the dog head, right? You remember the dog head with the blood filtration system? Yeah. This is the dude, Vladimir Demikhov, Russian scientist. Yeah. So this dude had a fascination with transfers, and I mean organ transfers and transplants and all that sort of thing. And of course, he used for his test subject dogs. Okay. So this dude transferred a dog head of a small young dog and put it on and transferred it to another bigger, older dog. Okay? He did this with actually kind of successfully with quite a few dogs. In fact, I think the longest, 2-dog chimera that he created lived almost a month. But still, it was horrifying, And of course, when he would have the second head, I guess the satellite head, as you would call it, the secondary head that he had sewn in there, go to eat, well, that it would just drool all over the place and not actually benefit the dog because he didn't have the esophagus hooked up. He just had like the heart and some of the ligaments and just, yeah. But yeah. But he also did a lung transplant on a dog and stuff. He did some work with heart transplants and stuff like that. He is considered the father of organ transplant. So while his experiments were horrifying, we cannot, in good conscience, entirely keep this freakazoid from being on the props list because he was the father of transplants. So, yes, weird, creepy, gross, right? Some of those wonderful, horrible medical experiments. So, and of course, there are hundreds and hundreds more out there. That is just the ones that I picked out that I found the most interesting, weird, creepy, and gross. So that have some decent contributions to our way of life today and will have decent contributions to our future. But still weird, creepy, and gross. So, anywho, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. I hope you guys can finally sleep and stay creepy, stay weird, stay scary. All right. Love you guys. Bye-bye.